Welcome to the Powerlifting and Power Ballads podcast, where we bring you a weekly dose of powerlifting news, tips, and training advice with a touch of 80s rock ballads. This podcast is presented by Team Roar Powerlifting, your source of the most comprehensive coaching and meet day preparation. Here are your hosts, Josh Rohr and Laura Sturm.
And welcome to the Powerlifting and Power Ballads podcast. I'm Laura Sturm.
And I'm Josh Rohr. We are on episode 14. We got a very special guest that we're going to get to in a second. But first, we're going to announce our track 14, which is Tesla Love Song. First thoughts real quick, Laura, before we move on.
I love Tesla. I've seen them live a few times. And that song's just, I was there when that came out. I mean, I lived through the 80s.
Get you in the heartstrings.
Yes.
So we are going to move on to our guest. Our guest today is Sherman Ledford. He is a 10-time Open National Team coach. He was the USA Powerlifting Georgia State Chair from 2001 to just recently 2020 for about 20 years. He's the owner of Quest Nutrition and Athletics in Duluth, Georgia, which is where Team Roar is based out of. These are some of the fun facts, and what we're going to focus on more today is he's a water ski enthusiast, a powerlifting historian. And if you want to hear some of the powerlifting history, you can check out the Spicy PL podcast, episode 18. Sherman talks with Big Joe Cap and those guys for quite a bit of time about some very interesting stuff. And we are going to talk to Sherman mostly today about music. So Sherman, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on.
Absolutely. It's good to see you guys.
I got to turn off my phone sounds here because I'm an amateur at this. So basically what Sherman and I have been talking, what we're going to do is actually, this is more than we can do in one episode. So he had the idea of kind of breaking it down by decade. So this is going to be the first episode of Sherman. He will be back for others to follow up. So I think today we're going to talk mostly about I think very early 80s and before. Is that correct, Sherman?
Yes, it's going to be in the 70s and then early 80s.
Awesome. So basically, the reason we're doing this, obviously part of this podcast is music related, but Sherman and I have a very similar taste in music, and I've heard some of the stuff he's played before, and that got me kind of curious, and I wanted to kind of talk about that. So Sherman, do you have any thoughts or anything you want to start with?
I think a lot of that probably goes to where Josh's parents and I are probably pretty similar in age. He probably got raised in some of this stuff. So he's probably got a lot of, just listening experience with his parents and stuff. And then just coming in kind of in the 80s and 90s and on. But in the 70s, I was in high school. So, and in the early part of college and stuff. So it was kind of a Southern rock kind of deal. So we got a lot of that stuff to kind of cover.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super pumped. So I'm going to actually hand it over to you. I know you got a list of songs that you want to talk about, and then we have a few questions for you too, just that we'll throw at you. So what do you got for us, Sherman?
Well, I tell you, I'm going to start off with this. And let me see if you guys can see this, because this was the first album that I ever trained to in my basement. Can you guys see that?
Oh,
Yes.
That's awesome. It looks like a quarter or a silver dollar or something?
It's like a silver dollar.
That is
Giant silver dollar.
That is badass.
Yep. So
That's
basically
the actual album?
That's the actual album cover, and the album's in it. I played this album probably 1,000 times. So
that's badass.
So, I mean, basically we had like a little, stereo and a little record player basically in my garage, and we crank it up, and basically this is Grand Funk Railroad, 1972, foot stomping music. That's probably the song that I rocked out to probably when I was probably in my mid-teens, when I really started kind of hitting the weights hard and stuff like that. I had this cranked up, and my parents really just kind of let me crank it up, and it was a lot of fun. So that's the first album really that I maybe even ever bought. So it's something special, and like I say, I've played that hundreds and hundreds of times. So I don't know if you guys know who Mark Farmer is, because he's kind of like the lead singer on that group. And man, that dude was an entertainer. Are you familiar with him, Laura?
Mm-mm.
Okay. It's just basically kind of an old Southern kind of rock and stuff, but those guys could put on a show. They were incredible. And so many of the stuff that back then and today, there's so many people, they'll go see a concert and you'll see somebody even live on TV or YouTube or something like that. And the recording in the studio sounds so much different than what you hear, it live. And these guys were just live. They were bonkers. That guy was just energy wall to wall, and he was running around like a crazy person. And most of the time just looked like he had some moccasins on with some white pants, and the dude was jacked up pretty good. He wasn't a real big guy, but I mean, he was put together pretty good, and that dude would put on a show. So another song that I really liked back then, and so many people have heard this song and they don't have a clue who sings it. They don't have a clue what the name of the song is, but a lot of people know the song as hey, 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 hey. And I mean, they played that in football games and basketball games for decades. And that song is by Gary Glitter. And the name of the song is Rock and Roll Part 2. And I'll tell you a little bit of tidbit about that. That song was in the last year's Joker movie. And it's been viewed 65 million views on YouTube, 65 million. And that song's over 45 years old. So, I mean, that song's kind of stood the test of time and been involved with a lot of sporting events and stuff like that. So that was another song that was kind of a go-to for us. And a lot of times you get to the point too, to where who you're training with is a lot of times what you listen to, because it's not like just your song. It might be some of your buddies' songs and stuff like that. So, you get a group of guys, and one guy would have a song he really liked, and we'd have some songs that I liked, and we just kind of rock them all and just put some weights up and just enjoy ourselves. But one of the songs one of my buddies really loved was Bad to the Bone by George Thoroughly Good.
Lonesome George.
That dude right there. Oh my gosh. And I mean, seriously, that song is like timeless too, because you still hear that song. I mean, you'll hear it in sporting events and stuff like that. And I know I'm a big PBR fan, professional bull riding. And there's one of the guys that was a world champion here in the last couple of years. And that's the music that he would come out to. So, I mean, it was something that was pretty cool. And he even actually performed at the PBR finals about 3 years ago. He came in.
George Thorogood did?
Yes.
Really?
He actually came. Yes. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago. He came to PBR finals in Vegas and performed that live. It was badass.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
It was really cool. So, but that's another song that we used to rock out and get some good lifting in and stuff like that. But
yeah, and just so everybody that's listening, I'm going to put the links to these songs in the YouTube description and in the on the actual podcast too, so you can actually click on them and listen to these songs. Because, like you said, Sherman, a lot of these songs you know them when you hear them, but you don't necessarily know the names of them. So I think we want to get everybody to listen to them.
It's something when you won't listen more than 10 notes and you'll know what it is. I mean, it's just like that. Another one, and I kind of have a special feeling towards this one because I did some pro wrestling with Nick Busick back in the past, and we were called the Terminators, and our gimmick was a little bit kind of geared toward the Road Warriors. So we were called the Terminators, and we had a lot of fun in the South traveling around for a few years. And then Nick actually ended up going to WWE for some years and performed up there as Big Bully Busick. But man, the Road Warriors, oh my gosh, those guys would come out to Iron Man and be like, I am Iron Man. And I mean, they would just hit the ring and that place would just be going bonkers. Those guys were just in a league of their own. And Animal just passed away, just a few weeks ago. So Laurinaitis was his name. And that guy was him and Hawk. They were performers like nobody's ever seen and nobody will probably ever see again. So that was something too that I really liked that song. But a couple more, really like the Allman Brothers, some other Southern music, just kind of Southern rock kind of music. And those guys were were real special, and they had a long run. Those guys were around for a long time. So, and one of my favorite songs by those guys was One Way Out. So that's another song that I really liked. Another couple songs that I like when I was in college, Billy Keel is actually a person kind of got me into powerlifting. And gosh, Billy would just rock out with Highway Song by Blackfoot. I mean, and that song's got, you know, some good guitar riffs in it and stuff. And it almost is kind of similar to Freebird because it comes into the song kind of slow, and then it kind of got a good, pretty intro, and you get into this, and then towards the end, it just goes crazy. So that was another really good song. And that album too was like a cobra up on a red album cover. And they had 2 songs on that album that were just badass. I mean, one of them was Train. And I know you've heard that in the gym because Jeff Robinson, oh my gosh. I mean, if Jeff's doing something heavy, that's what's coming on. And I mean, that song had some just hard, you know, it was hard and wide open. That song was really good.
Yeah, there's like 5 CDs at the gym that have that song on it, and they're all Jeff's CDs.
So but that's something too, like you say, you know, you get in with different people and different people like different stuff, and you might hear something that you might not heard before. But I'm sure Jeff probably heard maybe even Train the first time, maybe from me or Billy, you know. So I mean, that's been years and years ago. So probably another group that, and I know Josh asked me who I thought was really a really exceptional vocalist. And I really feel like that Paul Rogers was unbelievable. Laura, do you know who that is?
No, I don't.
Okay. He was the lead guy for Bad Company.
Ah, okay. Yes.
So, and a lot of people know Bad Company, but they really don't know that Paul Rogers is kind of like their lead guy. And that guy was unreal. I mean, he was really, really, his vocals were just unbelievable. He was one of the best back in that day. And gosh, it's just almost crazy how that group when they kind of dissolved or broke apart for a little while and stuff like that, he actually, after Freddie Mercury passed away, he kind of was the lead for Queen for a little while. So, I mean, to put that into context, I mean, you know, you got Freddie Mercury, who's probably one of the greatest voices of that generation. For somebody to come in and fill his shoes, that's saying something. That guy was really, he could really do it. That dude was incredible. So, me and Josh talked about this the other day, and he really likes this one too. And it's Taking Care of Business by Bachman Turner Overdrive.
ETO.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, that would be my song going to the gym. If I was going to the gym, man, I had a cassette player in there, I'd pop that ad and it'd be like, taking care of business every day, taking care of business and working overtime or something. But that song, oh man.
Yeah, if you don't get a little extra juice running through your veins when that comes on, you got something wrong with you.
And I that was just my thing when I was going to the gym. That's what I was listening to. It just seemed like something that just gets you kind of in the mood and kind of gets you right. So when you get in there, you was ready to go. So maybe a couple of these groups and stuff like that, or maybe a little bit on the down low or whatever. But Electric Light Orchestra, ELO. And they had some songs, and they had one particular song that was just really, I mean, it rocked hard, but gosh mighty. I know I've put it on the gym a few times, and it just starts off just weird. I mean, it is just strange for about a minute. And people, when you put it on, they're looking at you like, what the hell is that? You know, and then all of a sudden it just starts rolling. And actually that song used to be part of, if you watch Wide World of Sports back in the 70s and 80s, and they would have, you know, just crashes and just people just doing wrecks and stuff like that. And that was kind of like the riff that they used was that Fire on High by ELO, the real fast part and stuff. And I remember watching, you know, they had like a dragster coming down on a drag strip blowing up, and one of the things was like the guy that was doing a ski jump went off the side of it, went like a propeller, went through some trees. So it was pretty crazy. So other than that, I guess probably another group that I actually saw when I was in college live was the Outlaws. I mean, those guys could bring it. And the one song that I really liked from those guys was Ghost Riders in the Sky. And that song's ancient. I mean, Johnny Cash sang that song, you know, back in the 60s. and then they sang it in the 70s. And if you're familiar with that movie, somebody can't remember the name of it, but Spider-Bot redid that song probably in the 90s. And it was geared towards a movie where the guy that caught on fire and rode the motorcycle. Gosh,
Ghost Rider.
That's right.
Ghost Rider.
Okay. Ghost Rider in the Sky. That's it. So, and they redid that song, and probably people are maybe more familiar with Spider-Bot doing that song. It was pretty rocking. So, and I guess the other songs, I guess there's a few in there, but maybe not just Jim songs, but just songs that I just love to listen to. Is, man, I like the Ohio Players and love Roller Coaster. So that was just something that I listened to when I was younger and stuff like that, and kind of got into some more funk, I guess, more kind of graduated into some funk and some different things like that later on in the 80s and stuff like that, when that stuff got more and more popular. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, these songs are all songs that I've heard for the most part, and when you listed them off, I mean, I knew what Bad to the Bone was, and I knew what Train was. The rest of them I had no idea, just based on title, until you hear them, and then you're like, oh shit, yeah, I know that one. And you already kind of answered my first question. I was going to ask you, the most underrated vocalist, and when I asked you that at the gym, you said Freddie Mercury, and so afterwards I thought about that more and more, as he's very well known as one of the best vocalists ever, and you were still arguing that he was underrated, or he was the most underrated. And after the fact, I'm like, you know what? I think you can still make a case that he's the most underrated vocalist, as good as he was even.
And I think some of that, Josh, is just he's been gone so long that so many people don't know who he even is, So his career wasn't that long with Queen. And, Freddie Mercury is like just, legendary. I mean, the guy could hit notes that nobody could. And I mean, I've seen, I've never saw the Queen live because I really didn't go to concerts way back when that kind of happened, but when they were in and stuff like that. But man, that dude was incredible. And if there was somebody else that I would kind of put in that, that era as being like underrated, because, and when you ask somebody, do you know who this is? I mean, a lot of people know who Freddie is. I mean, he just was kind of, legendary for a lot of different reasons, some good, some bad. He was kind of a sexual deviant there for a while and kind of got himself in a sling, which I hate. But you look at Paul Rogers, man, that guy was unbelievable, and he's even he spanned probably 4 decades of just either singing with Bad Company or by himself or just with other groups and stuff like that. That guy was really, really something special. So
yeah, and Bad Company is actually one of those bands that you think of 1 or 2 songs off the top of your head, but then you start hearing more and more, and they got, I don't know how many songs that were pretty big hits. I mean, it's a pretty extensive list. They're not my favorite band, but they're one of my top favorite bands of all time.
I mean, who is your couple favorite bands back that time, Josh?
So Kiss is probably my number 1 back that time.
Okay.
All-time favorite is Foreigner, but I'm not sure they were kind of, I guess they kind of were late 70s, early 80s got rolling,
80s,
but yeah, they're probably more 80s.
Probably.
I was actually really into the Doors, believe it or not.
I was too.
Really?
Oh my goodness.
Into Jim Morrison as well.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, it's just kind of one of those random things. Like, I don't know how I got into the Doors, but I did. So yeah.
Interesting.
I had a buddy of mine in college. Oh my gosh. He was one of my best friends. His name was Chris Pepper. And we actually were over at Jack State in Alabama. And I went over there to play some ball and ended up getting my knee kind of folded back a couple times and laid that down and picked up powerlifting. But I mean, he was a real good friend of mine. We played ball together for a year there, and we just stayed friends. And oh my gosh, if Kiss was anywhere within 100 miles, I mean, he was going to go. I mean, he was just a freak, Kiss freak, crazy person. I mean, that dude was a a maniac fan of those guys, but those guys were, they could do it. No, Gene Simmons, that son of a gun. I can't even comprehend that guy is still alive almost. I mean, there's some of those guys were
True
nuts,
story.
you know.
So Kiss is actually the only band I've seen twice. I saw them. Well, let me go back. So I guess to answer the question I asked you, my most underrated vocalist is probably Paul Stanley from Kiss. And a lot of people probably won't agree with that, but I'm a big Kiss fan, so I'm gonna go with
Say
that.
it anyway.
But say it anyway. Yeah. Well, what are you guys gonna do? It's our podcast. And I saw them first. I think it was in either 2000 or 2001. It was their farewell tour, and I saw them again for the second time. I guess it was 2 years ago now. Went up to Ohio and saw them with my parents during their end of the road tour, which was 2019 or 2018, one of those years. So if you just think about that, that's almost a 20-year span that they were doing their farewell tour, essentially, which was basically after their main career. And I know Gene and Paul are both, I think they're both 70 something, and they're still out there just like putting on a show. It's really, it kind of doesn't make sense that they're still able to do that, but it was pretty impressive.
Right. And sound the same pretty much.
Yeah. And they still sounded great. It was just one of those, I don't know. That was one of the coolest things I thought was, because I saw the second time I saw them, I'm like, half expecting it not to be, we know they're 70. I'm like, well, they're probably just going to stand on stage and not move around too much. Shit. They were up on hanging from a little, like one of those like the rings you have at the gym, like to do pull-ups or whatever. There was basically they had one of those that came in from the rafters, and Paul Stanley puts one foot in it and it pulls him up over the crowd, and he like goes way out into the crowd, like, just put his guitar behind his back and he's singing, like standing on one foot on one of these like rings. I'm like, man, that is insane. Like
at 70 years old.
Yeah.
It's pretty badass.
Yeah. Pretty impressive.
I tell you, and the thing I said before, like Josh just mentioned, gosh, Matty, you see some people and you hear the album and you're like, man, that is just awesome. And you go and see them in concert and you're just like, oh gosh, that just wasn't what I was expecting. And you got people like Kiss and, different people. I mean, probably Foreigner, like Josh was talking about, and just, some people like that. Even if you're thinking about even a little bit later on, AC/DC, oh my gosh, those guys have been just doing it. And I mean, you see those guys live, some of the stuff that they've done the last 10 years, and they've been rocking since, the 80s. You're doing just crazy.
Well, they started out as live bands and then kind of it got recorded, but their following was from being live. So they sound good live. And nowadays it's kind of the opposite.
Right.
People sound good in the recording studio, then they go live and it falls apart. Don't ever go see Smashing Pumpkins. I don't know that you ever can now, but man, they were horrible in concert.
Yeah. So I also, I mean, I'm going to pass on what I was going to say. That's more 80s. We'll talk about that next time. I don't want to get off topic.
I tell you, another band that Billy liked a lot, was, and I mean, good gracious. And there's generations, and you have people like the Allman Brothers that went for decades and decades and decades and decades. And I mean, when I was younger and stuff like that, if you went into a bar or something like that and you had a live band up there, it was just always somebody was going to say, play Freebird, and it was just something that song was just so like, just lasted forever. And then those guys, I saw those guys like probably within the last 3 years on a live thing. And I mean, the lead singer's been gone for a while, but still, some of their guitar riffs and stuff like that are just, I mean, it's just crazy. So, and it's like Laura said, those guys, they came up, like the Allman Brothers and those guys and different groups like that were just, such just big, huge followings that just were unbelievable in concert. I mean, it was just crazy. So.
Yeah, and a lot of these songs you mentioned, I was going to ask you. So like, a lot of people have their songs that they're training to. Some people listen to like that death metal crap I can't stand. But for the most part, these are songs you listed are just they're easy to listen to. Are they kind of the songs you were trained to as well?
Oh, a lot of these songs, I mean, I've heard that Grand Funk Railroad, just countless times. And that was just my kind of, like I say, my go-to song when I was in high school and stuff. But I mean, good gracious, we would go to the gym in college. And I mean, and even when I got out of college, and I mean, Bad to the Bone was on, and you had a lot of people, playing AC/DC that period of time, and just something that you just rocked out in the gym because it was just kind of hard. I mean, and just kind of had a kind of a speed to it. It was just kind of, I mean, just like BTO's Taking Care of Business. I mean, when that comes on, I mean, your head's bopping,
Yeah.
or you're dead,
Right.
So.
You're
And that's
a communist.
That's the part that kind of always has confused me a little bit is people that, when that kind of music's on, like that gets me going. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just when people put on like that bang your head against the wall music, like, I just don't know how that really gets you like hyped, I guess.
I will say this, and it might even put a little perspective to that. And I hate even saying this, but it's true. I mean, the first time I heard AC/DC, that's kind of the effect I got from that, because it's just, and then I kind of grew to like it. And then you just see how people feed off of that. I mean, Thunderstruck is probably a song that I've maybe heard, at meets or, in the gym, maybe more than any other song that I've ever heard, and it's one of those things that it's almost like the next generation just takes it a little further. And I honestly, though, I want to be able to understand what the hell somebody's saying, and I mean, this stuff like what you're talking about, this, death rock and all this kind of stuff, hell, you can't even understand what the guy's saying. It's just, and you're just like, what?
Yeah, it just gives me a headache more than anything.
I can't do it. And the stuff too about some of this punk rock stuff with every other word's just, it's just, I don't even know. It's not music to me, it's just kind of, so.
Back in our day, we had innuendos and we didn't have to say it, but to say it. But now they just say things. I'm like, I can't.
It is. And some of that is just like, and I mean, I'm not good about, I'm sure not an angel when it comes to curse words, but it wasn't Lee. When you go through a song and it's got 50 F-bombs in it and all this other kind of stuff, and you can't understand the rest of it, it's just like, good gracious alive. Is that really what, gets you going? Man, not me, I just want to kind of, feel the music and be able to, really kind of enjoy it and stuff like that. So that's just me. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to kind of recap, like, we are, this is basically episode 1 with Sherman. We are going to have some more. And if I'm being honest, I'm really pumped about the next one because as everybody knows, the 80s is my decade. So we kind of touched a little on the early 80s and whatnot today.
When were you born, Josh?
I was born in 83, about a decade too late, I think. I think I was supposed to have been born like early 70s.
I agree.
The 80s are, in my opinion, I mean, that's probably my just era right there. That's when it was just all good. And there's songs that from the 80s. If I've got 10 or 15 songs from the 70s, I've probably got 50 songs from the 80s. It was just craziness. And I guess too, you just got to the point to where, if you wanted to go and kind of hang out and maybe meet somebody, you went to the club, and heck, man, I mean, it was just techno everywhere. And I mean, I know we got a little story about Josh in Miami and stuff like that.
That's
It's
for next
pretty-
time. That you can throw out the teaser, but that's for next time. You guys have to come back and listen.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet. What year was that, Josh? 2005?
2006.
2006. Okay.
Yep.
Oh yeah. That's something right there. And I bet money you weren't even around me when you heard that the first time. You probably heard that from Caleb.
I heard it from Caleb. Yep.
That's what I thought.
Yep. I still have a CD. He made me a CD of kind of his techno and 80s music that he was listening to when he was training, which I assume he got most of that from you.
Probably.
And then he made that for me, and I still have it. Still listen to it fairly often, actually.
Back in the day when you used to make a mixtape or burn a CD.
Honest to goodness, this is a true story. I mean, when I was I graduated from college in December '83, and I started working out with a group of guys. And one guy was Curtis Leslie, who was a 4-time IPF world champion. I mean, this guy was a true freak of nature back in the day, just lifting crazy weights.
He's still kind of a freak of nature.
It's just insane. I mean, the dude is just all time to me in my heart. And I mean, I love the guy. He's awesome. But, a lot of stuff that Kurt, I would go down. There was a record shop down in Atlanta, and I'd go buy 12-inch singles. And I mean, I don't even know if they had that. I mean, that's just prehistoric, but that's something that I would bring back and, get long versions of different songs. And dude, I'd make a tape, and I'd probably make one like every 2 or 3 months for a new one, bring it to the gym, and man, we would be cranking it up and just rocking out. Man, we had a lot of fun. And it was actually me, him, Nick Busick, were kind of the guys that were kind of like the leaders of a group. We had probably about 6 or 8 guys, and it was awesome because I was a little bit better deadlifter than those guys, and Curtis was a little bit better squatter than we were, me and Nick. And then Nick was just inhuman in the bench, and we just be chasing each other every day. Every day it was coming in for sure. Jay, you better be right because they're going to be running at you. So you better bring it.
That's awesome. So, hey, I'm going to ask kind of maybe it's a dumb question, but for anybody that is not as experienced as you guys, that's an old joke. What is a 12-inch?
Yeah, basically this is a 12-inch. So an album's 12 inches across. So I mean, okay. that's basically, and then would you go get your 12-inch singles? So basically, you might go down there and I mean, I don't know how many just albums like this that I have that probably don't have, but maybe at the most 3 songs. So you're going to have one side, and it's going to be anywhere from 8 minutes to 15 minutes on a single on one side, and then you might have 1 or 2 songs back on the back. So basically, you would have somebody that would really have, and a lot of that stuff too was just dance music back then, because you go in a club, and I mean the guy to be spinning the albums and stuff like that. So the dude would he's sitting up there and he's working his music and stuff, and he's put something on, and hey, you got something lasting 10, 15 minutes. I mean, it was just incredible. So
yeah, awesome. Well, I think we're probably going to wrap it up right there. We're trying to keep, we could go on for hours, but I'm trying to keep these episodes short enough that people can listen to them when they're driving to work and whatnot. But definitely come back, because we're gonna have Sherman back and talk about the 80s, and that may be multiple episodes to get through the 80s. I'm not sure, but thank you guys for listening. Sherman, I really appreciate you being on, and I mean, I'll see you at the gym tomorrow, but until then.
Absolutely. Everybody stay safe out there.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to check us out on iTunes and Spotify. Search for Powerlifting and Power Ballads. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Peace.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode of the Powerlifting and Power Ballads podcast, please remember to subscribe and share it with your friends.